It's a clash of titans at the Makedonia Palace Grand Prix. We have the explosive Veselin Topalov with the white pieces against the ever-precise Fabiano Caruana. High stakes, top-tier chess. Let's get into it. And we have a Rui Lopez on the board. The players are blitzing out the most classical and well-known moves, establishing central control and preparing to develop their pieces. Topalov castles his king to safety, and Caruana immediately expands on the queen's side with pawn to b5. Topalov finds the perfect response, bishop to b3. An excellent move, and in fact, the only one that keeps a solid advantage for white. And here's the idea. If black develops the bishop to e7, white strikes in the center with pawn to d4. After the pawn trade, the pawn pushes to e5, completely disrupting black's coordination. Development continues, black's bishop comes to c5, white brings a knight into the game, and after black solidifies with d6, Topalov plants a powerful knight right on d5. But here, Caruana's knight hops to a5, and this is an inaccuracy. He missed a golden opportunity to play knight takes e4, a tactical shot that would have won a piece, and Topalov pounces. He unleashes the brilliant pawn sacrifice d4. This move blasts open the center for his pieces to attack. The point is to generate a powerful initiative. After black takes the pawn, white's bishop comes to g5, creating a pin. If black pins back with bishop to g4, the rook slides to e1, and the pressure is immense. A storm of captures erupts in the center. Pieces are traded off left and right, and the sequence ends with white's rook landing on e1 with a powerful check. In a moment of extreme tension, Caruana finds the only move, king to f8, a fantastic defensive resource that keeps him in the game. Here's how it holds. If white's queen comes to d3, black kicks at a bishop with h6. After white recaptures the pawn on d4, the queen swings to f6, and black's position is solid. The position now stabilizes. Both players spend the next few moves maneuvering, improving their pieces, with Topalov putting pressure on the queen side while Caruana eyes the white king. White's rook lifts to a3, preparing to swing across the third rank, while black pushes the h-pawn forward, creating a hook for a future attack. Topalov's knight leaps into e6 with check, forcing the king to g8. This allows a bishop trade on b6, altering the pawn structure, before the knight repositions to g5. Black's rook slides to c8, but this is a slip. He had a much more active idea to create counterplay. The stronger move was rook to h5. After white plays pawn to f4, the pawn marches to h3. The rook lifts to e3, and the queen lands on f5, creating serious problems for white. But in the game, the rook goes to c8, and this gives Topalov a chance to play for a win, but Topalov misses his chance. His rook move to f3 is also an inaccuracy, letting Caruana completely off the hook. The advantage is gone. The battle rages on. Both sides probe for weaknesses in a complex middle game with queens, rooks, and knights all dancing around the board. And here, Topalov goes pawn grabbing, taking on d6. This looks tempting, but it's a mistake that lets black's pieces roar to life. The safer and stronger path was simply rook to e3. After bishop to f5, white plays pawn to c3. Following the trades on e4, white maintains complete control. Instead of that, the knight captures on d6, and this will surrender the advantage by activating black's rook. But Caruana misses the punishment. Pawn to f5 is played, but the killer counterattack was rook takes pawn on d5, which would have won a pawn and seized the initiative. Another swing. Topalov plays queen to e2, an inaccurate move that lets the advantage slip away for good. The position is now roughly equal, and Caruana finds the perfect way to punish it. Rook to h6 is a fantastic move, grabbing the initiative and putting black firmly in the driver's seat. Topalov sends his knight deep into enemy territory on e8, but Caruana calmly coordinates his forces, bringing his rook to c8 and his king to f8. This leads to a desperate move from white. Knight takes g7 is a sacrifice, but it's an unsound one that should lose the game. A better defensive try was rook to e7. After the knight is traded off, white can push the d-pawn. Black's rook comes to d8, but white can trade rooks with check, relieving the pressure. But in the game, Topalov sacrifices the knight on g7, hoping to create chaos. And Caruana calls the bluff. Queen takes the knight on g7 is the correct winning reply. He accepts the material and now has a decisive advantage. With an extra piece, black's attack is now overwhelming. The queen and rook reposition, building an irresistible assault against the exposed white king. White's queen moves to d4, but this defense is not adequate. There was a better way to create counterplay. The best chance was to push the pawn to d6. After queen to g6, the rook lifts to e5. Black's rook goes to g7, but the white rook can challenge it on e7. Instead, after the queen move, Caruana's attack with queen to d4 intensifies and black's advantage grows. Black's rook seizes the open g-file, landing on g7. The net is tightening around the white king as the queen also shifts to g6. White plays pawn to b3, but this is another miss. The best defensive resource was still using the passed d-pawn. Pushing the pawn to d6 was the key idea. After rook to e8, the rooks are traded with check. The bishop recaptures, and white's queen can snatch the pawn on b6, winning material. Back in the game, though, the pawn moves to b3, and black's winning advantage remains. A flurry of pawn moves now on the queen's side. Both players try to create a passed pawn, leading to a series of trades and a check from the white queen. Black simply recaptures the pawn on a4, keeping the structure level on that side of the board. White makes a last-ditch effort, pushing the central pawns to create a dangerous passed d-pawn. It's white's only real hope in a difficult position. The white rook lands on e7, putting pressure on black's back rank and supporting the advance of the d-pawn. And just when it seemed over, Caruana makes a serious inaccuracy. He pushes the pawn to a3, nearly letting white back into the game. The much safer and winning move was rook to b1 with check. The king moves to h2. The rook drops back to b7, and after a few more moves, black's king is perfectly safe. But in the actual game, the pawn pushes to a3, which allows a powerful check from white that could have won a rook and saved the game. White's queen gives a check on c4, forcing the king to h8. The queen then repositions to c3 as black's rook returns to a8. But Topalov misses the best follow-up. Queen to a1 is an inaccuracy that eases the pressure. The stronger move was king to h2 first, preparing for all possibilities. If the a-pawn pushes, the queen goes to a1. The bishop comes to e4, and the rook swings to c7, keeping black tied down. Instead, in the game, the queen moves to a1 directly, and the advantage slips away. Black's bishop challenges the white queen from e4, forcing it to retreat to the e5 square. Caruana retreats his bishop to c6, but this is another slip. He missed the most direct path to victory, which was pushing the passed pawn to a2 and winning a piece, and Topalov repeats his previous inaccuracy. Queen back to a1, once again missing the stronger plan of challenging black's control with rook to c7. Now black pushes the pawn to a2, but at this moment it's a huge mistake. This move allows a devastating counterblow. The correct path was to first play bishop to e4. After the queen moves, then the pawn pushes to a2. The white queen goes to a1, and the king calmly steps to h7, and black is winning. But in the game, the pawn goes to a2, and this allows white a stunning tactic with d7 that should have won a rook and turned the tables completely. The tension is at its peak. White's king steps to h2, and both sides maneuver their pieces around the two deadly passed pawns. And here it is, the final decisive error of the game. After fighting so hard to get back in it, Topalov makes a move that loses on the spot. The only way to hold on was rook to d2. After the bishop moves, the rook simply shuffles to e2, and white is covering all the key threats. But instead of that, the rook moves to e7, and this throws away the game for good. Black's king calmly steps to h7, out of danger, as white's queen makes one last, desperate attempt to create threats from f6, and Caruana seals the deal with the brilliant rook takes rook on e7, a fantastic exchange that liquidates the position into a simple and completely winning endgame. A series of forced checks follows. The white queen snatches a pawn on h4, the king steps up, and the queen recaptures the rook on e7. But wait, a shocking blunder from Caruana. With the win completely in his grasp, he moves his king to the wrong square. The simple and winning move was queen to f7. After a check, the king steps to f8. White pushes the d-pawn, but black's queen just takes it, winning a pawn and the game. Unbelievably, though, the king goes to h8, a huge mistake that throws away the win and makes the position a dead draw. The final twist in this unbelievable game. Given a complete gift, Topalov misses the draw and makes a mistake that loses on the spot. The simple draw was rook takes the pawn on a2. After black recaptures, white has a series of checks with the queen, forcing a perpetual check and saving the game. But he misses it. In the game, Topalov plays rook takes bishop on e4, a shocking blunder that allows black to win a rook and the game. In the final moments, Caruana promotes his pawn to a new queen. It's not the most clinical finish, but it's more than enough to win. The most decisive move was simply pawn takes the rook on e4. After a check from the queen, black's queen blocks on g7. After another check, the king is safe, and black is simply up a rook. Instead of that, the pawn races to a1 and becomes a second queen, and with this overwhelming material advantage, the game is over. The rest is a cleanup operation. With 2 queens against 1 rook, black's forces are overwhelming. They coordinate perfectly to corner the white king, and there is no defense. As a last gasp, white pushes the passed pawn to d7, but it's far too late, and Caruana plays the final great move of the game. Queen takes the pawn on d7, neutralizing the very last threat and forcing resignation, and with that, Veselin Topalov resigns. After a wild back-and-forth game full of incredible blunders and brilliant moves, Caruana secures the victory. White is down a queen with no hope. Here's just one sample of the unstoppable threats: rook to b2, rook to g8, rook to a2, rook to e8, queen to f2.